Hold up, Bolt fam, because this is the kind of day that hits like a blindside sack you never saw coming. Surprised? The Chargers didn't just make a couple moves, they sent a message. One fan favorite just cashed in somewhere else. A low-key addition could change the whole shape of the offense. The interior line is getting torn down and rebuilt in real time, and hovering over all of it is one wild possibility that could blow this offseason wide open. So let me ask you this right out of the gate. Are the Chargers getting smarter, or are they playing with fire? Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay locked in. Because the craziest part of this whole story is not the biggest contract, not the biggest name, and not even the loudest rumor. Excited. It's the domino effect behind all of it. And trust me, that part is where this thing gets spicy. Let's start with the move that's gonna sting for a lot of people. Watching Oweh walk hurts. It hurts because Chargers fans saw what he looked like in this defense, and for a stretch, he looked like a monster. He brought juice. He brought speed. He brought that feeling every time the quarterback hit the top of his drop that something bad was about to happen. And once you see that kind of impact in powder blue, it's hard to just let it go. That's why so many fans instantly looked at Washington giving him 4 years and $100 million and said, wait a second, the Chargers had the cap space. Why didn't they keep him? And that's the emotional side of it. The football side, that's where it gets complicated. Because paying a guy like a franchise cornerstone means you better be absolutely sure you're not buying the hottest stretch of his career at the highest possible price. Oweh was electric in Los Angeles, no question. But that is still a relatively short sample compared to the rest of his NFL resume. Before that late season surge, he had flashed, sure, but he had not consistently looked like a $100 million edge rusher. That's the part nobody wants to hear when a fan favorite leaves. It feels cold. It feels harsh. But this is the NFL. If you hand out elite money, you need elite certainty. And maybe that's the key question nobody can answer with total confidence. How much of Oweh's breakout was Oweh, and how much of it was the environment around him? Scheme matters. Usage matters. Coaching matters. Confidence matters. Some defenses unlock players the way a great point guard unlocks a scorer. The Chargers may have looked at the full picture and decided that paying top-tier money for what could have been the perfect fit at the perfect moment was just too dangerous. That doesn't make it painless, it makes it calculated, and whether fans love that or hate it, that kind of decision tells you a lot about how Joe Ortiz is approaching this roster. He's not throwing cash just to win the headline, he's trying to win the math. But then came a move that confused a whole lot of people for a very different reason. Because when the Chargers brought in Charlie Kolar, a lot of fans probably had the same reaction. Really? This is the splash? A tight end with modest receiving numbers, buried on the depth chart in Baltimore, getting a 3-year deal worth real money? On the surface, yeah, that looks underwhelming. It looks like the kind of move that gets shrugged off in 5 seconds. But here's the thing nobody's talking about enough. Not every important addition shows up in fantasy stats. Some guys get signed because they make the engine run smoother, not because they're the hood ornament. Kolar's value is in the dirty work. He blocks. He seals the edge. He helps spring the run game. He gives an offense flexibility before the snap and toughness at the point of attack. That stuff is gold if the Chargers are serious about building a more functional, more balanced, more unpredictable offense around Justin Herbert. And that's where this move starts making a lot more sense. A lot of fans see a number and compare it to catches. The Chargers are probably looking at how he fits with the structure of the offense and what he allows everybody else to do. Sometimes the guy who doesn't touch the ball much is the reason the whole play works. And when you pair that kind of player with a more dynamic pass-catching tight end, suddenly the position group starts looking a whole lot more interesting. One guy can stretch the defense, the other guy can do the trench work. One creates mismatches in space, the other creates angles in the run game. That's not flashy, but it can be deadly if it clicks. And that's why this signing feels less like a random dart throw and more like a clue. The Chargers are not just collecting names. They're trying to build an identity. Which brings us to a move that has fans arguing for a completely different reason. Because Zion Johnston leaving for Cleveland is where this whole thing gets weird. Not weird because he left. Weird because of the price. 3 years, $49.5 million, a deal that immediately had a lot of Chargers fans asking the same question. Wait, that's it? That was the number? Because after the chaos on the interior offensive line last year, Johnson was one of the only players who gave the unit any kind of stability at all. It wasn't perfect, nobody's pretending it was, but week after week, while the line was getting battered by injuries and shuffled around like a deck of cards, he was at least a steady presence. So when a guy like that leaves on a contract that doesn't look totally outrageous, fans are naturally going to wonder why the Chargers didn't push harder to keep him. And here's where the contradiction hits. On one hand, he was dependable in a bad situation. On the other hand, the inconsistency, especially in pass protection, never fully disappeared. Maybe the new staff looked at him and saw a decent floor, but not enough ceiling. Maybe they decided that if they were going to rebuild the interior anyway, they didn't want to keep 1 foot in the old version and 1 foot in the new one. Maybe they just wanted a clean break. That is a risky move, no doubt. Rebuilding the entire interior of the offensive line is not something you do casually. Chemistry matters there, timing matters, communication matters. One weak link can wreck the whole pocket, and now the Chargers are staring at a full-blown reset inside. That's a gamble. But it may also be a necessary one, because if the Chargers truly believe the old group wasn't good enough, then patching it up would just be putting tape over a cracked helmet. It might hold for a minute, but sooner or later it's coming apart again. And look at the pattern here. They didn't overspend to keep Oweh. They didn't chase the shiny box score tight end. They let a familiar offensive lineman walk instead of paying for comfort. That is not random. That is a front office making hard choices because it believes the bigger build matters more than the safer move. Which is exactly why the next rumor feels so explosive. Because while the Chargers still have major needs in the trenches, they are also doing their homework on veteran wide receivers. And if that market turns serious, one name towers over the rest like a skyscraper in the red zone. Mike Evans. Yeah, that Mike Evans. The touchdown machine. The jump ball nightmare. The kind of receiver who can make a defensive coordinator lose sleep before kickoff. And once that name enters the conversation, everything changes. Now let's be clear. This is still a market rumor, not a done deal. But if Evans is truly available, then the Chargers have to at least think about it. They'd be crazy not to. Because adding a receiver like that doesn't just give Herbert another weapon, it changes the geometry of the offense. Safeties play differently, corners play differently, red zone play calling changes, third down changes, defensive priorities change. A veteran alpha receiver doesn't just make catches, he bends the field. But this is where the fan base is going to split right down the middle. One side is going to say, go get him, no hesitation. Give Herbert a grown man target who wins contested catches, moves chains, and finishes drives. Push the chips in. Let's roll. The other side is going to look at the roster and say, not so fast. What about guard? What about depth? What about the front seven? What about balance? And that tension right there is what makes this so fascinating. Because if the Chargers make a move like that, they're not just filling a hole. They're making a statement. They're saying the time to help Herbert is now. And that brings us back to the bigger picture. These are not isolated stories. They're connected. Oweh walking for huge money says the Chargers won't pay every emotional premium. Kolar arriving says they care about structure as much as splash. Zion leaving says they're willing to rip up the blueprint and redraw it. And the Evans rumor says they're still hunting for the kind of move that can change the temperature of the whole offense overnight. That's the real headline here. Not chaos for the sake of chaos. Direction. A plan. A blueprint that may not look pretty in the moment, but could make a whole lot more sense by the time this roster is finished. So here's the question that's going to light up the comments, and I want honest answers. Are the Chargers playing this exactly right by staying disciplined, building smart, and refusing to get emotional with every big name? Or are they overthinking it when this roster needs a few knockout punches right now? Drop your take, share this with another Chargers fan, and let's argue it out. Because one thing is crystal clear. This offseason is not sleepwalking. It's loading up, staring down the field, and getting ready to take a shot.